it. Okay, I'm sure you're seeing these tubs up at the front filled with water, and you're thinking, what's going on? You're going to find out. All right. Maddox is the roamer bucket holder. I love it. I love it. Double tip, everybody. I love it. Well, hey, we're coming to Christmas. I love it. And you know what I really, really like? I love the fact that in this room, we already have a casual relationship. I like that. You and me, we have a casual relationship, okay? Which means, what I mean is this. We eat, we joke, we give each other rides. Thank you very much. In our culture, no, you do not touch my hand to your forehead in honor. You don't do that. And yes, I've been in cultures where that is the custom. No, none of you call me father as an honorific. And yes, I've been in some of those cultures where that is the culture. And you do tease me, however, looking at no one in particular. No names mentioned. In our culture in America, in the pastor-congregation relationship, we are equals. We are equals. 2,000 years ago, the rabbi-discipleship relationship, though, was not equal. Okay, the rabbi did not show up to a class to give a lecture once a week to some students that may or may not show up themselves, or who might skip class, or who may or may not turn in their homework. No, the disciples lived with the rabbi 24/7. I'll repeat that again in case you gloss that over. You may not believe me, but it is true. They lived with their rabbi 24/7. When he got up, they got up. When he walked, he walked. When he got on water, anyways, that's another sermon for another day. Their entire relationship back then was structured with the rabbi being the master. He has the authority. And the disciples were the young men in training that did everything for the rabbi. This was their culture. Smile. So let's go back to that famous painting of the Last Supper. Okay, here's the Last Supper again, which I showed last week. Last week I said that you need to erase all of their beards and their bald heads, okay, and insert pimples and body odor. Because when Jesus shared this Last Supper with his disciples, they were not middle-aged men. They were 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Which means the Last Supper is not a dinner of equals. It's not. Jesus is the rabbi, twice as old as his disciples. So in order to understand today's talk, today's sermon, you gotta really, Americans, try to imagine a culture with me that is not super independent, okay? Not the USA, okay? No Rambo culture where one man can take on an army, okay? Don't think of that culture. No, this is my room, get out, mom, kind of a culture. No. No, I have the freedom of speech. No, my rights. No, this is my land kind of talk. None of that culture, remove that. All these modern concepts didn't come until millennia later. The disciples' culture was much more like the family name is more important than my name. Or, do not dishonor our rabbi. How dare you? Or, what do my village elders think about this? That's the culture that they live in, that kind of thing. And by the way, this kind of culture isn't just 2,000 years ago either, okay? When I was a kid growing up in Hong Kong, and the teacher walks into the room, all the students stand up and say, "Good morning, Mr. Chan." And that's the culture. True. And if Mr. Chan asks a question and you know the answer, you do not just give the answer and talk. No. You respectfully raise your hand. And when the teacher calls on your name, you stand up and give the answer. The answer is 492. And then you may sit down again. None of this casual slouching around in your chair stuff. Yeah, 492. No. I remember when I first moved to America, 4th grade. I came from one culture, stepped into the 4th grade culture in U.S. public school, and the teacher asked a math question. I'm Chinese, so of course I know the answer. Whoosh, my hand went straight up. And the teacher's like, "Oh, Steve." And I did what I always did, stand up, the answer. And I gave the answer. And I thought I was very happy with it. And I sat down. I love it. The girl next to me leaned over. "In this country, you don't have to stand up." I remember that moment so clearly, just when it was, what? And I was like, in my mind, like, what? It was so shocking to me that you didn't have to stand up to honor the teacher. So think of an honor culture, not a personal rights kind of a culture. Now, if you're a disciple 2,000 years ago, the whole point of your discipleship is to serve your master. Why? Because you want to become like the master. You want to follow in his footsteps. You serve him all the way. So imagine this Last Supper. If there's not enough bread on the table, Jesus the rabbi is not the host that jumps up to get more bread for you disciples. No. Are you kidding me? Your whole identity as a Talmud, as a disciple, is to serve your rabbi. And any Middle Easterner or Asian person, even today, would say, duh. In America, it's like being an intern. You get the coffee, right? In the corporate world, you go bring the coffee for everyone else in the office. That's your job. And now just magnify that thought, being an intern, like 100%, 100x, okay? 100x that thought. To really get you in this East versus West culture in this 2,000 years ago, okay, in Hong Kong, when the family sits down at the table, okay, grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, uncles, aunties, brothers, sisters, there's a big pot of rice, huge pot of rice. Everybody eats rice, okay? And one person's job is to put rice in everybody else's bowls. Do you know who that person is? The youngest person at the table. So everybody just passes the bowl, the little kid, like a little 6-year-old, passing rice around to all of them. Okay, you're the youngest. You serve everyone else before any rice gets in your own bowl. That's the culture. Everyone else first. Thank you very much. I mean, so that's just one example. When we were in Indonesia planting churches, Kim was moving chairs around the church room. And a couple of people, I kid you not, anytime she does anything like that, menial tasks, she always, Pastor Kim, please don't move the chairs. That's not what the pastor should do. They will take the chairs away from her, take the light bulbs away from her, take the broom away from her. That's not what the pastor should be doing. They're very serious. And this hierarchical culture is so normal in Asia, in the Middle East. If you do it differently, you can make headline news like this, and I'm dead serious. This is the U.S. ambassador to China, Gary Locke. This is from 2011. Gary Locke is what we call an ABC, American-born Chinese. So he's like a banana. Yellow on the outside, white on the inside. So he is American. Being an American, he's at the Seattle airport, ready to board, and he goes and orders his own Starbucks. Now, a Chinese national was in the airport, saw him, the ambassador, and took this picture and posted it. And this is so countercultural to China-born Chinese that this photo went viral. Viral. I mean, this is the news that I just screenshotted. This top-ranking ambassador is getting his own coffee, carrying his own bag, looking after his own daughter. So here's the thing that you have to understand. American culture is the anomaly. This land this is the anomaly. We're a little bit odd compared to everybody else. The majority of the world's population understands the top-down culture a lot better than the hey, we're equals culture. So you just got to understand that the Last Supper, you've got 12 teenagers who understand it's their job to serve their rabbi. That's the culture. These boys get it. These boys love it. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to serve the rabbi. So rabbi's up here, disciples are down here. Master is up here, servants are down here. This is normal. So yes, these teenage disciples would set the table. They would get the bread. They would refill the wine. Jesus accidentally drops something, they pick it up. Jesus sneezes, all these handkerchiefs come out, all right? That's what it's like. However, with all this being said, there is one thing that the disciples do not do for the rabbi. And I quote from Rabbi Joshua ben Levi, "Every service which a slave performs for his master shall a disciple do for his rabbi, except the loosing of the sandal strap." Disciples did everything for their masters. Oh, almost everything. They had to draw the line somewhere. I mean, we want to grow our disciples, not humiliate them. So the rabbi's rule was disciples do not have to untie their master's sandals. That's too menial of a task. The slaves, not the disciples, should do that. Well, if you think the U.S. ambassador to China getting his own coffee was enough to make history, imagine the jaw-dropping, mind-blowing, mouth-opening, brain-bending, culture-shattering shock when Jesus the rabbi does this. Would you please stand with me as we read from John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. Read this through the eyes of a 2,000-year-old Middle Easterner. On your marks, get set, go. Before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he loved them to the very end. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and returned to God. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around him. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't understand now what I am doing, but someday you will." "No," Peter protested, "you will never, ever wash my feet." Jesus replied, "Unless I wash you, you won't belong to me." Simon Peter proclaimed, "Then wash my hands and head as well, Lord, not just my feet." Jesus replied, "A person who has bathed all over does not need to wash, except for the feet, to be entirely clean. And you disciples are clean, but not all of you." For Jesus knew who would betray him. That is what he meant when he said, "Not all of you are clean." And finally, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, "Do you understand what I was doing?" "Nope." "You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth. Slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them." Wow, this is the word of the Lord. Before you have a seat, I want you to turn to a new neighbor and answer this question. What's the dirtiest your feet have ever been? Go for it. Everybody's got a dirty feet story. So Jesus' feet are always dirty, almost always dirty. I mean, in a time, in a day and an age and an era before closed-toed shoes and socks, your feet were always exposed to dirt. In a time before paved roads, your feet were always getting dust on them. In a time before motor vehicles, donkeys and other animals were always around. And we know this is true. Where there are animals walking on the ground, there will be animal. You said it, not me. Yeah, you get. So yeah, Jesus' feet are always dirty. And if Jesus, the 30-year-old rabbi's feet are always dirty, imagine the feet of the 16-year-old disciples. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Ewith. They stinketh indeed. Verse 4. So Jesus got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist. Just from this one sentence, we know the whole room has gone quiet. Because remember, John the author is an eyewitness. Okay, he was a 17-year-old that was sitting right next to Jesus, okay, when this Last Supper happened. Okay, he's the eyewitness and he's writing this account. The guys, they're all laughing, they're eating, maybe singing, doing the Passover Seder together. Remember, they're reclining, not sitting, at a triclinium, which is a big U-shaped table. Okay, they're passing the bread, they're passing the wine, they're passing the dip. Woo, come on, gotta love it. Middle Eastern food, love it. And Jesus suddenly stands up. Now, when Jesus gets up off, from the table, all 12 young men would kind of sit up, straight, rapt attention. It's like, if the rabbi is getting up, we better get ready. Where are we going? Okay, what's going to happen? Okay, what's he doing? Is he going to teach us something? I mean, this isn't part of the normal Passover meal. Okay, we're in the middle of something here. So the room goes quiet. That Jesus got up. That's just interesting. Then Jesus takes off his robe. And we don't have the same kind of wardrobe that they do, but imagine that you have a nice button-up shirt, okay? Like, and underneath you have a plain white Hanes undershirt. Okay, or even better, imagine a wife beater. Okay, imagine a wife beater. So yeah, it's like Jesus takes off that button-up shirt and he's in his undershirt. Odd. Okay, or even better, imagine Jesus in a wife beater. Right? Shocking, I know. But that's exactly right. These boys would have been shocked. It's just like, what? Jesus? Now they're on the very edge of their tricliniums, like wondering why the rabbi is not dressed very rabbi-like. Is he going to put on a fancy king robe? Remember where they are. This is Passover. They've got huge expectations. They're all cheering him on to be king. They think they're in line with him. They have massive expectations. What is Jesus doing? Nope, he grabs a towel. He wraps it around his waist so that he can tuck in his long inner robe. His long inner robe is long too, so it doesn't get dirty. It's like, what? In that room, the teenager disciples are just astounded because they know this. When you put on you take off your robe and you put on a belt, okay, and you get in a cloth. This is the appropriate way to dress when you're about to work. Okay, but wait, the rabbi is not supposed to work. Okay, the disciples are supposed to work. The rabbi needs anything, the disciples are supposed to jump up and get it. So what kind of craziness is this? What is Jesus preparing to do? Say, Rabbi, please do not tuck your robes into your belt. It's like, whatever you're about to do, please let us do it. Please. A man of your standing is far too dignified and distinguished to show his ankles. Okay, that's culture. Do not show your ankles. It's like, so please, Master, stop. Please, stop. Imagine telling your Lord and God, please, God, stop. Just no. This is awkwardly embarrassing. To have a master that is so humble that he's dressed down, saying, my nature is to serve. They can't handle that in their culture. And this is the breakdown of the hierarchy of status in the first century. In the first century, class number 1, we have the master at the very top. Second class citizen, mistress and their children. Class number 3, a steward. Class number 4, a foreman. Class number 5, permanent hired staff. Class number 6 in their culture is day laborers. And class number 7, slaves. Notice that for number 7, I use the word slaves purposefully. Okay, I know our modern English translations of the Bible understand that the horrors of modern slavery is completely distasteful. So oftentimes when we read our English Bibles, they translate the word for us as the word servants to kind of like, so that we modern people don't freak out too much. However, in the first century Middle East, people were bought and sold as human property. They were slaves. They were owned. Although slavery then in the first century looked far different than slavery in the 17th century. Okay, one day, another sermon. So Ibn al-Tayyib comments on this verse by saying, on verse 4, he says, yes, the custom is that the master of the house serves his guests. You come over as a guest, I'll serve you. I'll kiss you on the cheek. I'll offer you oil for your head. I'll have somebody come and wash your feet. Okay? He serves his guests as did Abraham in Genesis 18. But it is not the custom that the master serves his slaves. What? No, of course not. You don't do this. But here we see the master, the rabbi, purposefully lowering himself lower than the mistress and the children, lower than the staff, lower even than the day laborers. You know, the temp that picks the apples? Down to slave status. Brothers and sisters, I hope this wrecks you. I hope this messes you up so bad. When you get a revelation of how your God humbled himself and takes on the form of a slave, you will never, ever, 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 ever be the same. This will change your life. This will make you stop your whining. This will stir up your heart to count everything else as rubbish for the sake of the master. That's what Paul says. Everything else is skubala. And skubala is the word poop. It's crap. I mean, it's in the Bible. And we just kind of make it nice in English. Rubbish, garbage. He said skubala. Whoop. Verse 5. So Jesus, the room is quiet. Jesus and his wife Peter, tucked in his robes into that belt, pours water into a basin. Then he begins to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that he had around them. I mean, if that picture of the U.S. ambassador to China getting his own Starbucks was shocking, it was like, what? There's no frame of reference for what is happening to the disciples right here. Why is the master Jesus serving those who are beneath him? Why? What on earth? And of course, if we are the disciples or we are the slaves, we know how ridiculously awkward it is for the master to serve us. And so what does Peter say? Of course, he says, no. Peter protested in verse 8. You'll never wash my feet. No. Master, stop it. We just cannot comprehend this kind of kingdom culture. We just cannot comprehend a culture where the king serves the peasants. It's so countercultural for God to purposefully go from master status to slave status. Purposefully. Even the disciples have the dignity of not having to untie the master's sandals because his feet are dirty. But yet here is the master with the smelly teenagers, cracked, dirty, soiled, caked foot in his hands. In the master's hands is his dirty foot. What? No. Peter's saying, stop it. One rabbi washed his 12 teenage boys' feet on down the line, around the triclinium, around that U shape. Can you just imagine the tears in the room? Just like, somebody please make him stop. This kind of thing should just not be. Jesus washed his foot, washed his feet. Jesus comes to Judas and holds Judas's filthy foot in his hands. He looks up at Judas, knowing the betrayal in Judas's heart, knowing full well that in a few minutes, Judas would head out the door and bring the guards to arrest Jesus. And Jesus washes Judas's foot too. What? And Jesus comes to Peter, holding Peter's filthy foot in his hands. Ugh. Literally crap on his feet. He looks up at Peter, knowing the denial that lies in Peter's heart, knowing full well that in a few hours, Peter would deny that he even knew Jesus. And Jesus washes Peter's feet too. What? Can you just feel the tenseness in that room? All those young disciples absolutely red with embarrassment. that their master is on his knees while they are seated. It just should not be. This kind of thing has never been done before in history. Never. What does it all mean? What is Jesus doing? You don't know where to start asking questions. Like, what, why, when, how, what, where, what? What universe are we in? Each one of them wants to object, but how do you object to the rabbi? 15 minutes later, a dozen pair of teenage feet are clean. Jesus washes off his own hands. He takes off that slave towel, smoothens out his inner robe, puts back on his regular robe, heads back to the table, and he sits down. The boys do not heave a sigh of relief at this point. They get more alert. They were waiting because they know the rabbi is about to teach them something profound. They all lean in. They're all taking mental notes of what Jesus is about to say next. Their throats are dry, just waiting for the next words that come out of Jesus' mouth. And Jesus says, I've given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. It's quiet, very quiet in that room. Selfish worldviews are colliding with an unprecedented act of humility. Their entire cultural structure is just being flipped upside down, and it's hurting their brains. It's quiet. Very quiet. And Jesus, looking at those I love that way the verse, he loved his disciples. He loved them to the very end. And Jesus ends with this. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. Will bless for doing these things. What things is God going to bless you for, brothers and sisters? What things will God bless you for? Well, we know for a fact that God will bless you for washing the feet of people who should be washing your feet. So I like to call it the teenagers. Teenagers, today the adults are going to wash your feet. Would you mind bringing up a chair and just lining it up right here in front of a bucket? Teenagers, come on. You guys are young, so we'll let you do the lifting, but then the adults are going to do the washing. Come on. If you're below the age of 18, bring it on this side and facing that way. There you go. Oh, you have to unhook them. Oh, thank you very much. Mackenzie, come on up. Thank you very much. Great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Excellent. Is this water cold? I put ice in it this morning, just for you. Oh, yeah, Jenna's here. Oh, man. Love it. Oh, 7. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Totally fine. I love that. I love this. This is so practical. I can only submerge 1 foot, she says. She's in a cast. I love it. Yeah, go ahead and take off your shoes. So Jesus washed the teenagers' disciples' feet. So shall we. And God will bless us for it. The scripture was explicit about that. God will bless you for it.